The red beacon pulsed steadily on Lieutenant Annika Reyes's monitor, its rhythm like a heartbeat struggling to persist. She stared at it, frozen for only a moment before her training kicked in. The signal originated from Sarek 3, one of humanity's most tenuous outposts, a Class 10 death world that orbited a volatile gas giant at the edge of colonized space. "Incoming priority distress beacon, Sarek 3 colony," she announced, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of Titan Station's communications hub. Message reads, "Colony destroyed. Hostiles unknown. Send help, or we die." The message repeated, each iteration more distorted than the last. Static crackled between the words, punctuated by what sounded like distant explosions. Annika's fingers flew across her console, boosting the signal, filtering interference, trying to extract more information from the garbled transmission. Commander Ellis, the duty officer, appeared at her shoulder. "Verification status?" "Authentication codes match, sir," Annika replied, not taking her eyes off the screens. "Signal strength indicates their main comms array is compromised. They're broadcasting on emergency power." Ellis frowned, his weathered face illuminated by the red pulse of the alert. "Sarek 3. That's the volcanic hellscape, isn't it? Economically marginal but strategically symbolic. Whatever that means to the council bureaucrats." "Yes, sir. Established in 2254. Population approximately 850. Mixed civilian-military operation." Annika's voice remained professional, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Her sister Maya was stationed there as a geothermal engineer. Ellis sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of what they both knew was coming. "Initiate emergency protocols. Alert command. But..." He hesitated. "Flag it as a potential non-intervention scenario." Annika's fingers paused over her console. "Sir? Lieutenant, you know the calculus as well as I do. Sarek 3 is a frontier colony under tenuous treaty protection. The Council will debate whether the strategic value justifies a rescue operation." Ellis's voice was gentle but firm. "Start the protocols, but manage your expectations." Annika nodded stiffly and turned back to her console. As Ellis walked away, she began the official procedures, but her mind was already racing ahead. The standard protocols would take too long. The bureaucracy would grind slowly while people died. Her sister would die. Quietly, she opened a secondary channel, one reserved for direct communication with the Titan rescue fleet. If she couldn't go through the system, she would go around it. "This is Lieutenant Reyes, Titan Station Communications. Priority 1 message for Commander Tanaka of the Aegis." She took a deep breath. "We have a situation." 12 hours later. Annika stood at attention in Titan Station's command center, facing a wall of screens filled with the stern faces of both military commanders and Galactic Council representatives. The debate had been raging for hours, voices growing increasingly heated as they weighed the value of human lives against political and economic considerations. The loss of Sarek 3, while regrettable, must be considered acceptable collateral in our current political climate, announced Councillor Davros, his thin lips barely moving as he spoke. The resources required for a rescue operation of this magnitude could destabilize 3 other sectors. "With all due respect, Councillor," Commander Hiro Tanaka countered, his image transmitted from the bridge of the Aegis. "We're talking about 850 lives, many of them civilians. Military personnel accept risk as part of their service," another councillor interjected. "And the civilians were adequately warned of Sarek 3's classification as a death world when they signed their contracts." Annika clenched her jaw so tightly it hurt. The discussion continued around her as if the colonists were merely numbers on a balance sheet. She had been summoned to the meeting only to explain why she had directly contacted the Aegis, a breach of protocol that would likely end with a reprimand in her file. But she couldn't bring herself to care about that now. "If I may speak, Admiral, she said suddenly, interrupting a particularly circular exchange about resource allocation. Admiral Hayes, commander of Titan Station, raised an eyebrow but nodded permission. The Sarek 3 colony represents more than just a strategic outpost, Annika began, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. It's a testament to humanity's resolve to survive and thrive in the most hostile environments. The technologies they're developing there for extreme condition survival have applications for every colony in the system. She took a breath, knowing she was about to cross a line. And if we abandon them now, what message does that send to every other human outpost on the frontier? That their lives are expendable when calculations get difficult? That an SOS to Earth might go unanswered if the timing is inconvenient? The silence that followed was broken by Commander Tanaka's voice. The Aegis is already prepped for departure. My crew is ready. We just need the authorization. Admiral Hayes studied Annika for a long moment, then turned to the screens. I'm authorizing a reconnaissance mission at minimum. The Aegis will investigate and report back with actionable intelligence. Then we'll make a final decision. Admiral, the counselor began to protest. This isn't a debate, Counselor. This is me informing you of Titan Station's operational decisions regarding assets under my command. Hayes' tone brooked no argument. Lieutenant Reyes, you'll coordinate communications with the Aegis for the duration of this operation. Annika saluted crisply. Yes, sir. As the meeting disbanded, Admiral Hayes gestured for her to remain. When they were alone, he fixed her with a stern look. That was insubordination, Lieutenant. Going outside the chain of command, then making an emotional appeal in a strategic briefing. Yes, sir, I understand, sir. Hayes' expression softened fractionally. It was also exactly what needed to be said. Off the record, Reyes, do you have personal connections to Sarek 3? Annika hesitated, then decided on honesty. My sister, sir. She's stationed there as part of the geothermal engineering team. Hayes nodded, unsurprised. I thought it might be something like that. Your intervention may have saved lives today, but don't make a habit of circumventing protocols. Next time, come to me directly. Understood, sir. Thank you. As she left the command center, Annika's relief was tempered by dread. The Aegis was the fastest ship in the rescue fleet, but even at maximum speed, it would take them nearly 48 hours to reach Sarek 3. By then, it might be too late. On Sarek 3, Colonel Mara Voss crouched behind the remnants of what had once been the colony's primary defense turret. Sweat streaked through the grime on her face, mixing with blood from a shallow cut on her forehead. The acrid stench of ozone and burning circuitry filled her lungs, despite the filtration system in her environmental suit. Status report, she barked into her comm unit. North quadrant holding, but barely, came the strained voice of Petty Officer Jaco Bren. We've repurposed mining lasers as perimeter weapons, but they're draining our reserves fast. East sector breached, another voice cut in, breathless with panic. They're phasing through the walls. Colonel, we can't... The transmission dissolved into static. Mara swore under her breath. All personnel in East Sector fall back to Central Command. Set charges as you retreat. We'll funnel them into a kill zone. She rose slightly to peer over the barricade. The colony, built into the side of a massive mesa to shelter it from Sarek 3's constant volcanic storms, was now a battleground. Half the structures were in ruins, and the protective dome that shielded them from the planet's toxic atmosphere was cracked in several places, emergency force fields flickering as they struggled to maintain pressure. In the distance, a fresh plume of lava erupted from one of the smaller volcanic vents, sending a wave of superheated gas rolling toward the colony. The environmental systems, already strained by battle damage, would be pushed to their limits when that wave hit. Environmental control, what's our status on the dome integrity? Mara demanded. 42% and falling. Colonel, replied a harried technician. The next eruption will breach our secondary containment. We need to evacuate to the emergency bunkers within the hour." Mara nodded grimly. They had planned for volcanic disasters. It was part of life on Sarek 3. What they hadn't planned for was fighting off an invasion at the same time. The attack had come without warning 3 days ago. One moment, all systems were normal. The next, strange metallic drones had appeared in orbit, descending through the atmosphere with unnatural grace. Initial attempts at communication had failed. The first assault had targeted their communications array, nearly destroying it before they managed to send their distress call. Since then, it had been a desperate battle for survival against an enemy they barely understood. The drones seemed semi-sentient, adapting to the colonists' tactics almost as quickly as they could implement them. Worse, they possessed some kind of phasing technology that allowed them to temporarily pass through solid matter, making conventional defenses nearly useless. "Colonel, I've completed my analysis of the drone we captured," came a new voice over the comm. "You should see this immediately." "On my way, Dr. Rowe," Mara replied, signaling to her squad to hold position as she made her way through the rubble-strewn corridors toward the science labs. Dr. Elias Rowe, the colony's chief exobiologist, looked like he hadn't slept in days, which, Mara reflected, was probably accurate. His usually immaculate lab coat was stained with hydraulic fluid and what might have been blood, and his hands trembled slightly as he gestured to the partially disassembled drone on his examination table. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Mara asked, eyeing the machine warily, even though it was clearly disabled. "A technological miracle, or nightmare, depending on your perspective," Rowe answered, his voice hushed with a mixture of fear and scientific awe. "The drone's processing core isn't fully mechanical. It's partly organic, a synthetic neural network grown around a central quantum processor." Mara frowned. "You're saying these things are alive?" "Not alive in the conventional sense. But not simply machines either." Rowe pointed to a pulsing node at the center of the drone. "This functions like a primitive brain. It can learn, adapt, perhaps even feel something approximating fear or aggression. And look at this." He activated a scanner, which projected a three-dimensional image of the drone's internal structure. "The phasing technology requires enormous energy. Each drone can only maintain its phase state for approximately 3 seconds before needing to recharge. That's why they've been attacking in waves." "So there's a vulnerability," Mara said, her mind already racing with tactical possibilities. "More than that," Rowe continued, excitement breaking through his exhaustion. "They appear to be networked. Each drone functions as part of a collective intelligence. If we could disrupt their coordination..." "We could stop them all at once," Mara finished. "How do we do that?" Rowe's expression fell. "That's the problem. Their communication system operates on quantum entanglement principles. Practically impossible to jam using our current technology." A tremendous boom shook the laboratory, sending instruments crashing to the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. "The volcanic front is here," Mara's comm unit crackled. "Dome integrity at 26% and falling." Mara steadied herself against the examination table. "Keep working on it, Doctor. Find me something we can use." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Dr. Rowe, pack up your essential research. If we have to abandon the colony, your findings might be the only thing that prevents this from happening elsewhere." As she raced back toward the defensive line, Mara's mind churned with grim calculations. Their ammunition was running low, their power reserves were critical, and now they were fighting both an alien enemy and the planet itself. She had sent the distress call knowing the chances of rescue were slim. Sarek 3 was too remote, too dangerous, too politically complicated for a straightforward emergency response. But she had to try, for her people, for the future of human expansion into the stars. As she rejoined her squad, the sky outside the dome turned blood red with the reflection of volcanic fire. Through the swirling ash, She could see the next wave of drones approaching, their metallic bodies gleaming ominously in the infernal light. "Hold the line," she ordered, raising her pulse rifle. "Whatever comes through that breach dies here." Aboard the Aegis, Commander Hiro Tanaka studied the tactical display with growing concern. The rescue cruiser was pushing its engines beyond safe parameters, the ship's superstructure groaning under the strain as they tore through hyperspace toward Sarek 3. "Status update," he ordered, his calm voice belying the tension evident in his rigid posture. "Engines at 112% capacity. Commander," reported his chief engineer. "She's holding, but I can't promise for how long." "Comms?" Lieutenant Park, the communications officer, shook her head. "Still no response to our hails. The last transmission from Sarek 3 was 18 hours ago. Just background static and what sounds like weapons fire." Tanaka nodded grimly. "And our latest orders from Titan Station?" His first officer, Commander Diaz, approached with a datapad. "Still contradictory, sir. Admiral Hayes has authorized our reconnaissance mission, but the Council representatives are demanding we stand down. They've diverted the Hermes to a mining dispute in the Callisto sector and are suggesting we join them." "A mining dispute," Tanaka repeated flatly, "while a colony burns." "Politics, sir," Diaz said with evident distaste. "Politics won't matter much to the dead. Xavier." Tanaka turned back to the tactical display. "What's our ETA?" 26 hours at current velocity," the navigator responded. "Too long, far too long," Tanaka made a decision. "Divert power from non-essential systems to the engines. Life support, artificial gravity, everything but weapons and shields. Reduce to minimal levels." The bridge crew exchanged glances. "Sir, that would push us to nearly 130% of rated capacity," the chief engineer protested. "The structural integrity." "Is your concern, Chief. But those colonists are mine," Tanaka interrupted firmly. "Make it happen. I want our ETA cut by at least 6 hours." "Aye, Commander." As the crew hurried to comply, Tanaka turned to his first officer. "Send a message to Titan Station. Inform them that due to communication difficulties, we may not be able to receive further orders until we reach Sarek 3. Diaz raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Creating plausible deniability, sir." "Creating room to maneuver." "Commander." Tanaka's expression was resolute. "This ship is called Aegis for a reason. We are the shield that protects humanity's frontier. I won't abandon those people to die because of political calculations." As artificial gravity diminished to conserve power, Tanaka felt the familiar lightness in his limbs. The lights dimmed throughout the ship, and the ambient temperature began to drop as life support systems scaled back to minimum levels. "Now, what do we know about these hostiles?" he asked, turning to the tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Walsh brought up the scant intelligence they had received. "Almost nothing concrete, sir. The initial distress call mentioned unknown hostiles. Subsequent fragmentary communications referred to drones or machines with some kind of phasing technology. They seem to be adapting to the colony's defenses." "Machines," Tanaka mused. "Autonomous or controlled?" "Unknown, sir. But there's something else." Walsh hesitated. Lieutenant Reyes from Titan forwarded some unofficial analysis. She believes the attack pattern suggests these drones may be related to the Zilani Sentinel probes encountered in the Procyon sector last year. "The Zilani," Tanaka frowned. "Their territory is nowhere near Sarek 3. "No, sir. But if these are autonomous Sentinel drones, they may have been dormant in the system for centuries. Perhaps something at the colony triggered them." Tanaka considered this. The Zilani were an ancient, highly advanced civilization that had mysteriously withdrawn from galactic affairs millennia ago, leaving behind automated defense systems that occasionally activated without warning. If these were indeed Zilani Sentinels, the situation was even more dangerous than they had assumed. "Prepare a full combat loadout," he ordered. And have Dr. Keita review everything we know about Xylani technology. If these are their sentinels, we need to know their weaknesses. As the ship accelerated to dangerous velocities, the hull creaking ominously around them, Tanaka gazed at the streaking stars, visible through the view screen. Out there, people were fighting and dying, holding out hope that someone would answer their call. "We're coming," he whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "Hold on." Back on Titan Station, Annika Reyes had not slept in 36 hours. She remained at her post in the communications hub, monitoring the increasingly desperate transmissions from Sarek 3 and relaying what intelligence she could gather to the Aegis. "Lieutenant Reyes?" A tentative voice broke her concentration. She looked up to find a young ensign standing beside her console, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "Commander Ellis thought you might need this," the ensign said, placing the cup next to her terminal. Annika nodded gratefully. "Thank you." She took a sip, grimacing at the bitter taste but welcoming the caffeine. "Any word on the Council's latest deliberations?" The ensign hesitated. "They're still in session, but there's a rumor that they're drafting a formal censure of Admiral Hayes for authorizing the Aegis mission." "Let them censure," Annika muttered. "At least he did something." She turned back to her console as a new transmission came through from Sarek 3. The signal was weaker than before, fragmented and distorted, but she could make out Colonel Voss's voice through the static. "Do. Fallen back to secondary perimeter. Dome integrity critical. Emergency bunkers. 12 hours of life support remaining. Strange behavior from the drones, targeting our power grid specifically." Annika boosted the signal, trying to clean up the transmission. "Colonel Voss, this is Titan Station. The Aegis is en route to your position. ETA approximately 20 hours. Can you hold out?" The response was nearly lost in a burst of static. "We'll try. Discovered something. Dr. Rowe believes quantum entanglement, central coordination. If we could only—" The transmission cut off abruptly. "Colonel Voss? Colonel Voss! Please respond!" Annika's fingers flew across her console, trying to re-establish the connection, but there was nothing but dead air. She swore softly, then composed herself and opened a channel to the Aegis. "Commander Tanaka, latest transmission from Sarek 3 suggests they've discovered something about the drone's coordination system. Something about quantum entanglement." The signal cut off before I could get details, but Dr. Elias Rowe was mentioned. He's their exobiologist. There was a delay before Tanaka's response came through, distorted by the Aegis's headlong rush through hyperspace. "Understood, Lieutenant. Any other intel?" "They've retreated to secondary defenses. Dome integrity is failing. They've got emergency bunkers with about 12 hours of life support remaining." She hesitated, then added, "The drones seem to be specifically targeting their power grid." "Targeting power," Tanaka repeated thoughtfully. "That supports the Xylani Sentinel theory. Their drones were known to prioritize disabling a target's energy systems before moving in for the kill." "Sir?" Annika struggled to maintain her professional demeanor. "Do you think they can hold out until you arrive?" There was a longer pause. "We've pushed our ETA forward by almost 8 hours by redlining every system on this ship. We'll get there with time to spare. Lieutenant, just keep that channel open. Any information you can relay could make the difference." "Yes, sir." Annika took a deep breath. "There's something else you should know. I've been monitoring Council communications." This was, strictly speaking, beyond her authority, but she had long since passed the point of caring about regulations. "They're preparing to issue a direct order for the Aegis to abort its mission and divert to the Callisto sector. Communications are rather unreliable at our current velocity, Lieutenant," Tanaka replied, a hint of dry humor in his voice. "I suspect we may experience an unfortunate equipment failure right about the time that order comes through." Despite everything, Annika found herself smiling. Understood, Commander. Fly safe. As she closed the channel, her console lit up with a priority alert. Admiral Hayes was requesting her presence in his office immediately. When she arrived, she found the Admiral standing at the window that overlooked Titan's bleak, methane-shrouded landscape. He did not turn as she entered. Lieutenant Reyes reporting as ordered, sir. Hayes continued to stare out the window for a moment before speaking. The Council has voted to formally classify the SAREC-3 situation as a non-intervention scenario. They're issuing orders for the Aegis to abort its rescue mission. Annika's heart sank. Sir, with all due respect. I'm not finished, Lieutenant. Hayes interrupted, finally turning to face her. His expression was unreadable. The vote was 19-1. I was the dissenting vote. He moved to his desk and activated a holographic display showing a strategic map of the sector. The Council's reasoning is that we can't risk confrontation with potentially Xylani technology over a single colony. They argue that the diplomatic repercussions could endanger dozens of other outposts if the Xylani perceive it as aggression. So we just let them die? Annika couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. That's what the Council has decided, Hayes said neutrally. They've dispatched peacekeepers to ensure compliance with the non-intervention order. Peacekeepers? Annika repeated, confused. To where? Hayes's expression hardened slightly. That's what I wanted to discuss with you, Lieutenant. The peacekeepers aren't being sent to SAREC-3. They're being deployed to intercept the Aegis. Annika stared at him in disbelief. They're sending warships against our own rescue vessel. That's insane. That's politics, Hayes corrected grimly. The Council can't afford to let this mission succeed. It would undermine their authority and set a precedent for other commanders to disregard strategic directives in favor of humanitarian concerns. The way he said it made it clear what he thought of the Council's priorities. Is there anything we can do? Annika asked desperately. Hayes studied her for a long moment, then turned off the holographic display. Officially? No. We've been overruled at the highest level. Any attempt to countermand the Council's orders would constitute mutiny. He walked around his desk and stood directly in front of her. Unofficially, Lieutenant Reyes, I noticed that your shift ended 3 hours ago. As of now, you're off duty for the next 12 hours. What you do with that time is, of course, your own business. Annika frowned, not understanding. Hayes continued, his voice deliberately casual. I also noticed that your security clearance gives you access to our long-range communication protocols, including the ability to send narrow-beam transmissions that wouldn't appear in the general comms log. Understanding dawned. Yes, sir, that's correct. Hypothetically speaking, Hayes said, if someone were to use such a channel to warn the Aegis about the Peacekeepers' deployment vectors, it would give Commander Tanaka the opportunity to adjust his course accordingly. But that would be a serious breach of protocol. Hypothetically, Annika agreed, her heart racing. Hayes nodded and returned to his desk. That will be all, Lieutenant. Enjoy your off-duty hours. Thank you, sir. Annika saluted and turned to leave. And Reyes, Hayes called after her. When she looked back, his expression had softened slightly. I hope your sister makes it home safely. On SAREC-3, the situation had deteriorated from desperate to catastrophic. Colonel Mara Voss, her face streaked with soot and blood, led a group of survivors through the emergency access tunnels beneath the colony. The main dome had finally collapsed 2 hours earlier, forcing them to abandon the surface structures entirely. Status report, she demanded, pausing at a junction to consult the schematic on her wrist computer. Petty Officer Jaco Bren, limping slightly from a shrapnel wound to his leg, checked his own device. 32 survivors confirmed in our group. Maybe another 40 in Dr. Rowe's group if they made it to the auxiliary bunker. Power reserves at 17% and falling. Mara closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the grim numbers. When the attack began, They had been 850 strong. Now, less than a tenth of that number remained. And the drones? Still searching the ruins above? They seemed to be focusing on the power core, just as Dr. Rowe predicted. Bren hesitated, then added, "The good news, if you can call it that, is that the volcanic activity is hampering them too. The latest eruption has covered half the colony in lava." Mara nodded grimly. Sarek 3 had always been a death world, a planet so hostile to human life that merely existing there required constant technological intervention. The massive gas giant it orbited created tidal forces that kept the planet's core in perpetual turmoil, resulting in near-constant volcanic activity across its surface. Only the rich mineral deposits and strategic location had justified establishing a colony there in the first place. "This way," she ordered, leading the group down a narrow passage that sloped steadily downward. The air was growing hotter. The walls of the tunnel warmed to the touch. They were approaching one of the geothermal tap sites that provided power to the colony. After another 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a reinforced door marked with hazard symbols. Mara entered a code, and the door slid open to reveal a cavernous chamber carved directly into the bedrock. Massive conduits carried superheated steam from the planet's depths to turbines that generated electricity for the colony. And in the center of the chamber stood Dr. Elias Rowe and his group of survivors, clustered around improvised workstations cobbled together from salvaged equipment. "Colonel Voss!" Rowe exclaimed, hurrying over to meet them. "We feared you hadn't made it." "Not all of us did," Mara replied grimly. "What's the situation here?" Rowe led her to a central console, where a holographic model of one of the drones rotated slowly in the air. "We've made a breakthrough. The drones are targeting our power systems because they feed on energy. Electrical, thermal, even kinetic. They're not just destroying, they're harvesting." "For what purpose?" "To fuel their phase-shifting technology, primarily, but also to sustain their organic components and to transmit power back to their control node." Mara studied the hologram intently. "You've located the control node?" "We believe so." Rowe manipulated the display to show a larger drone, nearly twice the size of the others, hovering just beyond the planet's atmosphere. "This mothership coordinates the entire swarm through quantum entanglement. Disrupt it, and the drones should at least temporarily lose their coordination." "Can we reach it?" Rowe shook his head. "Not directly, no. But we might not have to." He gestured to another scientist who brought forward what appeared to be a modified power coupling. "We've constructed a quantum resonance inverter. If we connect it to the main power grid and overload the system, it should create a feedback pulse through their energy harvesting network." "Frying them from the inside?" Mara concluded. "In theory, yes." Rowe's expression was grim. "But there's a catch. The pulse would have to originate from our primary reactor core, which is currently at the center of drone activity on the surface, and someone would have to trigger it manually. The automated systems are too damaged." "A suicide mission," Mara said flatly. Rowe nodded reluctantly. "Even if the pulse works, the resulting power surge would destroy what's left of the colony's systems, including life support down here." Mara was silent for a long moment, weighing their options. "How long do we have before life support fails anyway?" "At current consumption rates, less than 10 hours. "And has there been any response to our distress call?" Rowe glanced away. "The communications array was one of the first things destroyed. We have no way of knowing if anyone is coming." Mara made her decision. "Prepare the device. I'll take it to the core." "Colonel!" Bren began to protest. "That's an order. Petty officer." Mara's tone brooked no argument. "You'll take command of the survivors. Lead them to the emergency evacuation site in the western tunnels. It's our deepest shelter. If anyone does come looking, that's where they'll start." "And if no one comes?" Bren asked quietly. Mara met his gaze steadily. "Then You'll have bought a few more days to find another solution. That's the best any of us can hope for now. As Dr. Rowe and his team made final adjustments to the quantum resonance inverter, Mara checked her weapons and environmental suit. The journey back to the surface would be perilous, even without the drones. The colony's environmental systems had failed completely, meaning she would face Sarek-3's natural atmosphere, a toxic blend of sulfur compounds and volcanic ash that could corrode exposed equipment in minutes. When the device was ready, Rowe handed it to her with obvious reluctance. This has to be connected directly to the primary control junction of the reactor core. Once initiated, you'll have approximately 30 seconds before the feedback pulse begins. Understood. Mara secured the device to her utility belt. Bren approached, offering her a backup power pack for her suit. Colonel, Maya would be proud of you. Mara froze. How did you know about Maya? She spoke of you often. Her sister on Titan Station. She was proud that both of you were serving on the frontier in your own ways. Mara hadn't known. She and Maya had been close once, before diverging career paths and the vast distances of space had come between them. Now, it seemed, they would never have the chance to reconnect. If anyone does come, she said quietly, tell Maya. Tell her I'm sorry we lost touch. Bren nodded solemnly. I will, Colonel. With final preparations complete, Mara made her way to the access shaft that would lead her back to the surface. As the elevator began its ascent, she allowed herself one moment of doubt, one moment to acknowledge the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Then she pushed it aside. Fear was a luxury none of them could afford now. The Aegis emerged from hyperspace in a storm of electromagnetic distortion. Its hull glowing cherry red from the stresses of its headlong rush across the stars. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the ship as systems strained beyond their limits struggled to compensate for the sudden transition to normal space. Damage report, Commander Tanaka ordered, gripping the arms of his command chair as the ship bucked and shuddered around him. Hull integrity at 78%, the tactical officer reported. Engines overheating but functional. Weapons systems online. Shields at 60% and regenerating. Tanaka nodded grimly. The Aegis had pushed herself to the breaking point, but she had delivered them to Sarek-3 ahead of schedule, and ahead of the Council, peacekeepers sent to intercept them. Scan the system, he ordered. Focus on orbital space around Sarek-3 and the colony location. The sensor officer worked his console, then looked up with alarm. Sir, multiple contacts in orbit around Sarek-3, mechanical in nature, unknown configuration, one larger vessel and approximately 200 smaller craft. The drones, Tanaka muttered. And their mothership. What about the colony? Difficult to get clear readings through the volcanic activity. Sir, the main dome appears to have collapsed. I'm detecting some power signatures beneath the surface, but they're weak and failing. Tanaka studied the tactical display, his mind racing through options. The mothership. Is it aware of our presence? It appears to be reorienting, sir. I think we've been detected. Tanaka made his decision. Battle stations. Divert all available power to weapons and shields. Target the mothership with the main rail cannons and prepare to fire. Sir, the first officer cautioned. If those are Xylani sentinels, attacking them directly could have serious diplomatic repercussions. I'm aware of the risks, Commander Diaz. Tanaka replied evenly. But those colonists don't have time for diplomatic niceties. If we destroy the central control node, we might be able to disrupt the entire swarm long enough to get our people on the ground. Diaz nodded reluctantly. Understood, sir. Targeting solutions locked, the weapons officer reported. Rail cannons charged and ready. Fire, Tanaka ordered. The Aegis shuddered as its main weapons discharged, sending hyper-accelerated projectiles streaking toward the mothership. The first salvo struck true, penetrating the drone vessel's outer defenses and causing visible damage to its structure. But the mothership was far from helpless. It immediately returned fire, energy beams lancing out to impact against the Aegis's shields. Simultaneously, the smaller drones began to change course, forming into attack formations and accelerating toward the rescue vessel. Shields holding at 52%. Tactical reported. The mothership is damaged but operational. Drone swarm inbound. ETA 3 minutes. Continue firing on the mothership, Tanaka ordered. Prepare point defense systems for the drone swarm. And get me a direct communication channel to the colony. Any frequency they might be monitoring. As the battle in orbit intensified, the communications officer worked frantically to establish contact with the survivors below. Sir, I'm getting a weak signal from beneath the colony ruins. Audio only. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice strained with exhaustion but resolute. Unknown vessel. This is Petty Officer Jaco Bren of Sarek 3 Colony. If you can hear this, we have approximately 30 survivors in the emergency bunkers. Life support failing. Please respond. Tanaka leaned forward. Petty Officer Bren, this is Commander Hiro Tanaka of the Titan Rescue Fleet vessel Aegis. We're engaging the hostile craft in orbit. Prepare your people for immediate evacuation. There was a pause. Then, Bren's voice returned, thick with emotion. Commander Tanaka, you have no idea how good it is to hear your voice. But there's something you should know. Colonel Voss has taken a device to the colony's reactor core, something called a quantum resonance inverter. It's designed to create a feedback pulse through the drone's energy harvesting network. Tanaka exchanged glances with his officers. When will this pulse be initiated? Unknown, sir. She left approximately 40 minutes ago. If she made it to the core... The tactical officer interrupted urgently. Sir, energy spike detected from the colony ruins. It's massive and growing exponentially. On the surface of Sarek 3, Colonel Mara Voss connected the final coupling of the quantum resonance inverter to the primary control junction of the reactor core. The journey to this point had been a nightmare of toxic fog, collapsing structures, and nerve-wracking encounters with patrolling drones. Twice, she had nearly been discovered, saved only by the environmental chaos of the planet itself, volcanic tremors and ash clouds providing cover at critical moments. Now, as she input the activation sequence, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This would be her final act as commanding officer of Sarek 3 Colony, her final act as a human being. The device hummed to life, its indicators changing from amber to pulsing red as the countdown began. 30 seconds. A sudden tremor shook the chamber, nearly knocking her off her feet. Not a volcanic tremor. This was different. Through the shattered dome above, she could see flashes of light in the sky. Weapons fire. Someone had come. For a wild moment, she considered trying to deactivate the device. But no, it was too late. The process had begun, and the countdown was already at 15 seconds. Even if she could somehow survive the pulse, the colony's systems were too damaged to sustain life. But perhaps the others could be saved now. She activated her comm unit. This is Colonel Mara Voss to any Earth vessel in range. Quantum pulse initiating in 10 seconds. Target the mothership immediately afterward. Its defenses will be temporarily disrupted. She didn't know if anyone could hear her, but she had to try. 5 seconds. She closed her eyes and thought of Maya, wondering if her sister would somehow know what had happened here. If she would understand the choice Mara had made. 0. The quantum resonance inverter discharged with a sound like reality itself, tearing apart. Energy coursed through the reactor core, building exponentially as it created a feedback loop with the drone's harvesting network. The pulse expanded outward, a wave of disruption that caught every drone within the colony in its grasp. Mara didn't feel pain, only a momentary sensation of weightlessness, as if she were floating free of gravity's pull. Then nothing at all. In orbit, the effect of the pulse was immediate, and dramatic. The swarm of drones surrounding the Aegis suddenly faltered, their coordinated attack patterns dissolving into chaos as the quantum entanglement linking them to the mothership was disrupted. "Now!" Tanaka shouted. "All weapons on the mothership, maximum yield!" The Aegis unleashed everything in its arsenal: rail cannons, energy lances, and a barrage of tactical missiles. Without its defensive coordination, the mothership was vulnerable. The combined assault tore through its weakened structure, triggering a chain reaction of explosions that ripped the vessel apart from within. "Direct hit," the tactical officer reported, unable to keep the exultation from his voice. "Mothership critically damaged. It's breaking up." Throughout the system, the drone swarm reacted to the loss of their central intelligence. Some simply powered down, drifting inert through space. Others began moving in random, erratic patterns, occasionally colliding with each other in their confusion. "The threat is neutralized," Commander Diaz confirmed, "at least temporarily." Tanaka nodded grimly. "Launch the dropships. Get our people on the ground immediately. Medical teams, engineering, environmental specialists. I want those survivors secured and evacuated within the hour." As the rescue operation began in earnest, Tanaka opened a channel to Titan Station. "This is Commander Tanaka of the Aegis. Mission successful. We've neutralized the hostile force and are beginning evacuation of Sarek 3 survivors." After a brief delay, Admiral Hayes' voice responded. "Understood. Commander, well done. Be advised that Council peacekeepers are still en route to your position. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. By then, we'll be long gone," Tanaka assured him, "with the colonists safely aboard." "About that," Hayes said, his tone sobering. "Lieutenant Reyes has been monitoring communications from the surface. There's something you should know. On the planet's surface, the Aegis's dropships landed amid the ruins of what had once been a thriving colony. Emergency teams in heavy-duty environmental suits spread out, following life sign readings to the underground bunkers where the survivors had taken refuge. The scene they found was one of desperate endurance. 37 colonists, many injured and all exhausted beyond measure, had survived in rapidly failing life support conditions. They greeted their rescuers with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming relief. Petty Officer Jake O'Brien, acting as interim commander, provided a brief account of what had happened: the sudden attack, the desperate battle for survival, and finally, Colonel Voss's sacrifice that had turned the tide. "We need to recover her body," he insisted, even as medics treated his injuries. "She deserves to be returned to Earth." The rescue team leader nodded understanding but remained realistic. "We'll try, Petty Officer, but the reactor core was ground zero for the quantum pulse. There may not be anything left to recover." As the evacuation proceeded, one of the search teams made an unexpected discovery in the western tunnels: a sealed laboratory containing Dr. Elias Rowe's research on the drones. His meticulous notes and the partially disassembled drone he had been studying provided the first comprehensive look at the technology they had faced. This discovery, at least, could be saved, knowledge that might prevent similar tragedies in the future. Within 2 hours, all survivors and critical materials had been loaded onto the dropships. The rescue teams took a final sweep of the accessible areas, recovering what personal effects they could for the colonists who had lost everything else. As the last dropship prepared for liftoff, one of the engineers paused at the entrance ramp, looking back at the devastated landscape. Volcanic activity was already beginning to reclaim the site, lava flows creeping across the ruins of humanity's brief presence on this hostile world. Was it worth it? He wondered aloud. All this suffering just to plant a flag on a death world? The team leader followed his gaze. That's not for us to decide. Our job was to answer the call, and we did. The dropships ascended through Sarek 3's toxic atmosphere for the last time, leaving behind a failed colony, but carrying with them the most important thing: its people. Most of them, at least. 3 days later, The Aegis docked at Titan Station to a hero's welcome. Despite the Council's official censure of the mission, public opinion had swung dramatically in favor of the rescue operation once news of the colonists' plight had spread through the system. Admiral Hayes personally greeted Commander Tanaka as he disembarked. "The Council is furious," he said, not bothering to hide his smile. "You've caused quite the political storm, Commander." "I followed my conscience, sir," Tanaka replied simply, "and my duty as I understood it." "As did we all." Hayes nodded toward a figure waiting anxiously nearby. "There's someone who wants to meet you." Lieutenant Anika Reyes stepped forward, her uniform crisp, but her eyes red-rimmed from too many emotions and too little sleep. "Commander Tanaka, I want to thank you personally for what you did. Without your courage—" "The thanks belong to your sister and the other colonists." "Lieutenant," Tanaka interrupted gently. "They held out against impossible odds. We just answered their call." Anika's expression faltered. "My sister, Maya, she wasn't among the survivors." "No," Tanaka confirmed softly. "According to the colony records, she was lost in the initial attack. I'm deeply sorry." Anika nodded, struggling to maintain her composure. "And Colonel Voss? Is it true what they're saying, that she sacrificed herself to save the others?" "The evidence suggests so. Yes. The quantum pulse she initiated disrupted the drones long enough for us to destroy their mothership. Without her action, we might not have succeeded." "She was Maya's commanding officer," Anika said quietly. "My sister wrote about her in her messages, said she was the toughest, most dedicated officer she'd ever served under, that she made them all believe they could survive on that hellish planet. And many of them did survive, because of her leadership," Tanaka assured her. "Her sacrifice won't be forgotten." As the survivors of Sarek 3 began the process of rebuilding their lives, the political ramifications of the Aegis mission reverberated throughout the system. The Council's attempt to classify the colony as an acceptable loss faced unprecedented public backlash. In response, they were forced to redefine their intervention protocols, with Titan Station leading the push for more humanitarian considerations in future crises. Commander Tanaka, despite the formal reprimand in his record, found himself elevated to something of a folk hero among the frontier colonies. His defiance of bureaucratic inertia in favor of human lives resonated with those who lived on the edge of explored space, who understood all too well how tenuous their existence could be. For Lieutenant Anika Reyes, the aftermath brought both grief and purpose. She mourned her sister, but found solace in the knowledge that her actions had helped save 37 lives. When offered a promotion and transfer to Earth, she declined, choosing instead to remain at Titan Station, the first line of response for distress calls from the frontier. 1 month after the Sarek 3 evacuation, a small, private ceremony was held in Titan Station's Memorial Garden. A simple plaque was unveiled, bearing the names of all those lost in the colony's fall. At the center, 2 names were highlighted: Maya Reyes and Mara Voss. As the gathering dispersed, Anika remained before the memorial, tracing her sister's name with her fingertips. Commander Tanaka approached quietly to stand beside her. "The Council has approved a new rescue cruiser," he said, after a respectful silence. "Faster, better armed, specifically designed for high-risk extractions from hostile environments. They're calling it the Voss." Anika smiled faintly. She would have hated the attention, but approved of the purpose. "I've been offered command," Tanaka continued. "And I'm looking for a communications officer who understands the importance of answering every call, regardless of political complications." Anika turned to face him, understanding the offer implicit in his words. "I'd be honored, Commander." Together, they looked up at the memorial, at the hundreds of stars visible through Titan Station's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, more colonies were taking root on hostile worlds, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and ingenuity. Some would thrive, others would fail, but all of them did so with the knowledge that their calls for help would be answered. Because an SOS to Earth is never answered lightly, but it is always answered. Even from a death world,